You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, we've got breaking news happening right now. We have a major indictment that was just turned in at the hands of the Trump administration. Can you explain the news?
Yeah, Brian, former FBI Director James Comey was just criminally indicted on 2 counts, according to the reporting. 1 count for lying to Congress, or what we call a 1001 violation, false statement to Congress, and the second count is an obstruction of justice charge. Now, interestingly, the reporting said that there were 3 counts and the grand jury indicted him on 2, which obviously leads to the reasonable inference that they refused to indict him on one of the counts that was presented to them by whatever federal court prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office is unethical enough to present this case in the first instance. But, you know, that is now all water under the bridge. I will tell our viewers that the 2 counts carry an aggregate 25 years in prison. It's a 5-year statutory maximum for making a false statement to Congress, and obstruction of justice is a 20-year offense. Now, I find this beyond curious because it was just yesterday that reporting revealed that there were a group of federal prosecutors in that office, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Alexandria, Virginia, who presented a memo to the newly sworn-in United States Attorney for that district, Lindsay Halligan, somebody with no prosecutorial experience. And that memo recommended that James Comey not be indicted because the suggestion was there wasn't enough evidence that he committed a crime. They couldn't even make out the extremely low evidentiary standard of probable cause, which is the standard for a grand jury to actually indict somebody for a felony crime. And clearly they couldn't, prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury's satisfaction. That's the highest evidentiary burden known to the law. And yet, apparently, the U.S. Attorney, in receipt of that memo by career prosecutors, who I assume had been working the investigation of James Comey in that office, prosecutors who said, we don't have it, we can't do it. This brand new Trump appointee and longtime Trump loyalist, Lindsay Halligan, who was actually another one of Donald Trump's personal criminal defense attorneys in the classified documents case, decided that she was just going to fumble forward and bring what, by all accounts, look like unethical charges that will end up not being supported by the evidence. But here we are, Brian.
Well, with that said, and I want to talk about vindictive prosecutions in just a moment, but folks are going to look at this and say the left is saying that the Trump administration is engaged in a vindictive prosecution, but that wouldn't explain away the fact that the jury would still vote out an indictment. And so can you respond to that a little bit, that it's not just the Trump administration acting unilaterally here? This did involve the buy-in from members of the jury.
Yeah, it sure did. And that buy-in is only as good and reliable and legitimate as the presentation of the evidence to the grand jury by whatever federal prosecutor was willing to go in and present the evidence. Brian, there's a reason that there is the saying that a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. The only time that is true, that a grand jury will indict anything the prosecutor tells them to indict, is when the prosecutor stacks the deck in the grand jury, kind of builds that nice little ham sandwich, him or herself. You can pull the wool over the eyes of the grand jurors and have them indict or refuse to indict anything if you're not an honest, ethical broker of the facts and the law when you are the prosecutor in the grand jury. So I will not listen, there's been a lot of public reporting about how there is no there when it comes to Donald Trump's suggestion that James Comey committed crimes. But I will wait to see exactly, 1, what the language of the grand jury indictment is, and 2, what kind of motions are immediately filed by James Comey's legal team on the topic of vindictive and selective prosecutions, even malicious prosecution. And then we have to see the evidence. We'll have to see a court filing with at least some proffer of the evidence that the Department of Justice contends it has supporting these criminal charges. But until I see the evidence with my own eyes and assess it as a former career prosecutor, I am not willing to pronounce that this is a legitimate indictment just because the grand jury did it, took this step, because that indictment is only as good as the ethics of the prosecutor who presented the case to the grand jury.
Now, with that said, going into the vindictive prosecution element of this, to what extent does the fact that we know that this U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia replaced a previous U.S. attorney also appointed by Trump expressly because that person wasn't willing to bring prosecutions against Trump's political enemies, and that includes Letitia James. And so now you have somebody who's shown that not just in this case, but other cases as well, that person is willing to do the bidding of Donald Trump. To what extent can the Letitia James example and even Trump's own words factor in here to James Comey's defense?
Oh, this is going to be the most robust, the most compelling vindictive prosecution motion to dismiss that we have probably ever seen filed in the history of our criminal courts. And I don't say that hyperbolically. When you have Donald Trump just days ago posting things like, look, I've been reading social media posts saying we're not being aggressive enough. Same old story. Nobody's being prosecuted. And then Donald Trump says, we need to take action now. And he uses as justification for it, this is mind-blowing, hey, they indicted me, they prosecuted me, and in essence, I'm going to get my pound of flesh from them. Brian, that's not a basis to bring a criminal indictment against anybody. The fact that you were indicted for your crimes, Donald, or the fact that, the right is railing on social media that, they want to see somebody prosecuted. It is such a compelling vindictive prosecution case that I, not only do I expect robust litigation, what we're going to see presented in court in a motions hearing on a vindictive prosecution motion to dismiss is not only what we have seen publicly, but it is what Comey's lawyers will be able to mine and unearth about what's been going on behind the scenes. But as of right now, it looks like this new U.S. attorney, Lindsay Halligan, is little more than a variation on the theme of most of Donald Trump's political appointees, whether it's Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, RFK Jr., these, this clown car full of incompetence and imbeciles. But I'll tell you, the way it looks right now, Brian, I kind of feel like today is the day we can pronounce death, because today is the death of the legitimacy, any lingering hope of the legitimacy of Donald Trump and Pam Bondi's Department of Justice. So we can set the date of death for the Department of Justice as presently constituted on September 25th, 2025.
Glenn, to what extent are you concerned about the fact that Donald Trump is now out and out abusing the Department of Justice to go after his political enemies? He's starting with a certain tranche of people that he's been very vocal about going after. And how concerned does that leave you about the prospect of the next rung of people and the next rung of people who are, maybe go from overt political enemies to a lesser degree of political enemies to people who are just general political opponents to just anyone who is willing to speak out against him on the left?
Yeah, it leaves me deeply concerned, Brian, because we are now in a new phase of Trump's weaponization of the Department of Justice. I mean, DOJ is now figuratively a gun in Donald Trump's hand, and he is going to discharge that gun in the direction of, all of his political enemies. And I think it's horrific that people may be forced to contend with vindictive, baseless prosecutions. They're going to have to hire legal counsel. It will undoubtedly cause them all kinds of angst and anxiety, sleepless nights. It will, impact their family members. all of which is horrific. If there is any consolation or any little point of light amidst the Trump-induced darkness, it is this. The federal courts continue to hold strong, particularly the trial court judges, and I don't believe for a minute they will endure or endorse or allow to move forward in the system this kind of vindictive prosecution. So that's why I anxiously await the motion to dismiss that will inevitably be filed by Comey's legal team. And I have a feeling Comey's legal team will run circles around Pam Bondi and Lindsay Halligan's legal team of lapdogs, flunkies, and sycophants. And here is what I hope for at the end of the day. I hope once the federal judiciary exposes Donald Trump's vindictive prosecutions for what they are, what that will reveal for all to see is that Donald Trump's threats are hollow. He's a paper tiger. He will fail in court this time, and he will fail in court every time he brings vindictive prosecutions. And I actually think that will reduce his power, not enhance his power. I think today's move is the kind of gross miscalculation that we saw in the Jimmy Kimmel arena, with Kimmel doing bigger numbers than he ever did before, with the public rising up, right? He does seem to have awakened the sleeping giant. The public rising up in defense of Jimmy Kimmel, of all people. I think now on the legal front, this is the equivalent of, the nuclear blunder when he indicts Jim Comey for committing no crimes.
Well, look, I would take this opportunity to ask, for those who are watching right now, a big antidote that folks who are speaking out against this administration have is the ability to reach lots of people and get the truth out against the best wishes and the best efforts of this administration. So a small step that we would ask for everybody watching is, if you are not yet subscribed to both of our channels, please go ahead and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything to do so. It helps bolster us as we continue to speak out against this administration, and it's a great way to support independent media, especially as we watch legacy media continue to drop the ball. So those links are in the post description of this video. So let's talk about Lindsay Halligan for just a moment. She is there because she was willing and able to serve as kind of an appendage of Trump. Again, the previous U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia wasn't willing to do Trump's illegal bidding, and so that person, he was out, and now we have Lindsay Halligan in. Does she shoulder any personal liability by virtue of abusing her position to do something that we can all see is in service of Trump's desire to go after his political enemies?
Yeah, interestingly, today, coincidentally, another former Trump lawyer, Kenneth Chesebro, there was some more action in his ethics investigation and case, and he was again suspended from the practice of law for what he did on behalf of Donald Trump and trying to help him steal the 2020 election. And absolutely, Lindsay Halligan shoulders much of the blame and the responsibility if this proves to be an unethical prosecution. But together with Lindsay Halligan, whoever the federal prosecutor is in the Eastern District of Virginia U.S. Attorney's Office, who, is operating in an ethics-free fashion and doesn't really care about his or her license to practice law, who went into the grand jury and secured an indictment that Eric Siebert, the longtime federal prosecutor in that office, and Donald Trump's former United States attorney until just a few days ago, would not indict, and that apparently a group of prosecutors in that office, drafted and sent up to the U.S. attorney a memo saying, don't do it, we don't have it, it's not righteous. Listen, there will be responsibility on Lindsay Halligan's shoulders, on the shoulders of whoever the other prosecutor or prosecutors are that might be involved in this bogus case. And I predict they're all going to be referred to their state bar for ethics investigations and possible sanctions up to and including disbarment.
Glenn, in terms of the remedy for someone like James Comey, but not just for someone like James Comey, because we have seen that this administration is and will go after anybody who it perceives as their enemy. And so is there any remedy here for people who get caught up in this dragnet that the administration is casting out to go after their political opponents? Or Does anybody who has any tangential relationship to the left that this administration decides to sick the Department of Justice on just have to shoulder the costs, the anxiety, the fear, the possibility of incarceration that's posed at the hands of a weaponized DOJ?
James Comey, at the end of the day, may have a viable suit to bring for a violation of his civil rights for being vindictively prosecuted by a dictatorial president. I don't pretend that those are easy lawsuits to win or even to litigate, because you have to sort of break through sovereign immunity or qualified immunity, the immunity that the government and government officials typically have when somebody tries to sue them for doing, their job, for acting within the scope of their official governmental duties. But vindictively prosecuting somebody because the president wants to punish his enemies by any means necessary is really not within the official governmental duties of a U.S. attorney or a prosecutor. So I'm not going to pretend Jim Comey will have a robust remedy, but there will be avenues that he can go down to try to address what has been done so horribly wrong to him. But right now, he's got to saw the legal wood in front of him, and that looks like a court appearance for Jim Comey. The first court appearance is called the presentment hearing. That's when the indictment is unsealed and made public. The charges are read to the defendant and his attorney unless he waives reading of the charges. And the purpose of it is really threefold. One, to put the defendant on notice of the criminal allegations that are being made against him so he can begin to prepare his defense. Two, set a next court hearing date. That could be in a matter of days or weeks. And three, decide what to do with this particular defendant during the pendency of the case. I have to believe that he will be released either on personal recognizance or by posting some kind of a low-level bond, because I don't think the prosecutors will suggest Jim Comey is a flight risk or a danger to the community. But with the Trump administration and Lindsay Halligan now heading up this prosecution, it's anybody's guess how much lower they will stoop. Or, of course, they could ask that he be detained, preventively detained, jailed, pending trial, but they will not have a factual or legal basis to make that kind of a request in this case. So, we could see Jim Comey appear in court as early as Friday, or they could set the arraignment date for sometime next week.
All right. Well, obviously things are moving quickly here. So for those who are watching, if you'd like to follow along on this case and any other legal news, please make sure to subscribe. Again, it's a great way to support our work. It is completely free to do so, and it's a great way to show some support for independent media. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.